What if what seems like an impossible obstacle in your life today is actually the very place where God is about to open a way? Many times we find ourselves surrounded by problems, difficult decisions, closed doors, and situations that seem to have no solution. Maybe you are living through a moment like this right now, looking ahead and seeing only a sea in front of you, something far too big to cross on your own. In this video, we will understand how God often acts precisely in these moments when everything appears blocked. You will discover why, in many stories throughout the Bible, the miracle does not happen before the challenge, but right in the middle of it. And more than that, we will learn how to recognize when God is preparing a path that you still cannot see. If today you feel stuck, uncertain about the future, or waiting for something in your life to finally change, stay with me until the end. Because the Bible shows that when God decides to act, what once seemed impossible can become the very path that leads you into a new season. Before we begin, it's important to share a small note. This video was created with the help of artificial intelligence tools, used to organize biblical content, structure the reflection, and make this message clearer and more accessible. Even so, everything you will hear here is grounded in the scriptures and in the purpose of bringing understanding, hope, and spiritual direction to those who are facing difficult moments. Now let's look at one of the most striking situations in the Bible, a moment when an entire people believed there was no way out. There are moments in life when everything seems to close in at the same time. A person looks ahead and cannot see a clear path. They look behind and notice problems approaching. And the more they try to find a solution, the more they feel trapped inside a situation they cannot control. Maybe you have experienced something like this before. A difficult decision that seems to have no clear answer. A financial struggle that grows faster than the solutions. A relationship in crisis. A project that once looked promising, but suddenly became blocked. In moments like these, the most common feeling is the sense of being surrounded. The Bible describes a situation exactly like this in the book of Exodus. The people of Israel had left Egypt believing they were finally walking toward freedom. But suddenly something unexpected happened. Pharaoh's army began to pursue them. Exodus 14:10 describes that moment very clearly. When Pharaoh drew near, the people of Israel lifted up their eyes, and behold, the Egyptians were marching after them, and they feared greatly. The scene was terrifying. Behind them was a powerful army, trained and armed. In front of them was the Red Sea, a natural barrier impossible for thousands of people to cross. On both sides, there was only desert. Humanly speaking, there was no escape. This is a powerful image because it reflects exactly how many people feel at certain moments in life. The feeling that the options have run out. The impression that any path you choose might only lead to more problems. When that happens, fear begins to dominate the thoughts. The mind tries to calculate possibilities, but none of them seem to work. The heart begins to imagine negative outcomes. And little by little, a silent question appears. How am I going to get out of this? That is exactly what the people of Israel felt in that moment. The biblical text says they lifted their eyes and saw the army approaching. What once looked like a journey toward freedom now seemed to be turning into a trap. And something important happens to us in moments like this as well. When circumstances become difficult, our first reaction is often to look only at what is threatening us. Our eyes fix on the problem. The mind begins to circle around fear. When someone is inside the situation, everything seems bigger than it actually is. The obstacle feels final, the blockage feels permanent, and the mind begins to believe that this moment is the end of the story. But the Bible shows something interesting about situations like this. Many times, when human beings believe they have reached the limit, God is only beginning to act. In the case of the people of Israel, the sea was still closed. The army was still coming behind them. Humanly speaking, nothing had changed yet. But something important was about to happen. Because in the very place that looked like the end of the road, God was about to reveal something that no one there could imagine. Before we continue, if this kind of biblical reflection makes sense to you and helps you see life with more clarity, take a moment to subscribe to the channel. That way you won't miss future content that brings spiritual insight into real-life situations. And now an important question arises. If it seemed to the people of Israel that there was no way out, why did God allow them to reach that exact point? That is what we are going to understand next. When a person is facing a difficult situation, The first thing that often happens is a natural limitation of vision. We are not speaking only about physical sight, but about how the mind interprets what is happening. Human beings tend to evaluate reality based only on what they can perceive in the present moment. If there is an obstacle in front of their eyes, the mind quickly concludes that the path is blocked. If a door closes, the natural assumption is that no other option exists. And when several difficulties appear at the same time, many people begin to interpret that as a sign that nothing is going to change. This kind of perception is very common during moments of emotional pressure. A person tries to find a logical solution to what they are facing, but cannot see a clear way forward. And the more they think about the problem, the more the situation appears completely stuck. This happens because the human mind often works based on previous experiences. If something seemed impossible in the past, the tendency is to project that same conclusion into the present. The person looks at the current situation and thinks, there is no path here. But what we often forget is that our perception is limited. We see only part of the story. We see what is happening now, but we cannot see everything that may still be unfolding. This is exactly what happened with the people of Israel in front of the Red Sea. They were looking at a real barrier. The water ahead could not be crossed. The army behind them was a real threat. From a human perspective, the conclusion seemed unavoidable. There was no path. That scene represented a complete blockade. The people had no boats to cross the sea. There were no bridges, there was no human strategy capable of solving that situation. Everything indicated that they had reached the end of the journey. But the Bible reveals something very important about how God acts in moments like this. Many times, while people see only the blockage, God is already working on something that is not yet visible. Isaiah 43:19 brings a powerful declaration about this. Behold, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs forth, do you not perceive it? I will make a way in the wilderness and rivers in the desert. This verse reveals a pattern that appears repeatedly in the scriptures. God often creates paths in places where no one would imagine a path could exist. The desert is not the place where someone expects to find rivers, and the sea is not the place where someone expects to find a road. But the biblical story shows that the limitation is often in our perception, not in the power of God. What appears impossible within human logic may simply be the setting where God has decided to act. The problem is that while the path has not yet appeared, the human mind tends to interpret silence as absence of action. Many people think, if God were really doing something, I would already see clear signs. But the scriptures show that God often works behind the scenes first. Before the miracle becomes visible, there is an invisible process unfolding. Something is being prepared. Circumstances are being arranged. Directions are being aligned in ways that human eyes still cannot perceive. In the case of the people of Israel, they still did not know what God was about to do. They only saw the sea in front of them and the army behind them. But what looked like a complete blockade was about to become the setting of a miracle. This is one of the reasons why biblical faith does not depend only on what the eyes can see. Faith also involves trusting that God may be working even when nothing seems to have changed yet. Many people today are living in exactly this kind of moment, a season in which the situation appears stuck, a time when the answers have not yet appeared. And the question that rises in the heart is God really preparing something? The story of the Red Sea shows that many times God's path begins to appear exactly when people believe they have reached the final point. And that leads us to an important question. If God was preparing a way in that moment, why didn't he open the sea immediately? The answer to that question reveals a spiritual principle that appears in many stories throughout the Bible. There is a very interesting detail in the story of the Red Sea that many people tend to overlook when they read this biblical account. When we look at the story quickly, it may seem as if the miracle happened first and then the people simply crossed. But when we pay close attention to the sequence of the text, we realize that the order of events reveals something much deeper. Before the sea opened completely, before there was any visible path in front of them, God gave a clear instruction to the people. It was not an instruction to retreat. It was not a command to return to the desert. And it was not an order to simply wait for something to happen. It was an order to move forward. Exodus 14:15 records that moment very directly. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Why do you cry to me? Tell the people of Israel to go forward." Imagine the scene for a moment. In front of them was still the sea. The water had not yet divided. There was no open passage. Behind them, the Egyptian army was still approaching. Humanly speaking, that instruction seemed completely illogical. But this detail reveals a spiritual principle that appears repeatedly throughout the scriptures. In many moments in the Bible, God calls for movement before he fully reveals the path. This happens because biblical faith is not built only on what has already been resolved. Faith often appears in the very moment when someone chooses to trust God, even without seeing the complete solution. Many people think faith means waiting until everything becomes clear. They imagine that first God will resolve every circumstance, remove every obstacle, and open the entire path. Only after that will they take the next step. But in many stories in the Bible, the opposite happens. The movement of faith comes first. The miracle begins to unfold during the process. This pattern appears in several moments throughout Scripture. When Joshua led the people of Israel to cross the Jordan River, the water did not open while everyone stood still looking at the river. The biblical text shows that the river began to recede only after the priests took the first step and placed their feet in the water. While they were simply observing the obstacle, nothing changed. But the moment they obeyed God's direction and moved forward, something began to happen. Another example appears when Peter decided to walk on the water. Jesus did not enter the boat to bring Peter to him. He simply spoke one word, "Come." Peter had to step out of the boat first. The miracle began when he chose to trust and take that step. These stories reveal an important pattern in how God works in people's lives. Many times the path does not appear fully before the decision is made. It begins to reveal itself when someone chooses to trust and move forward. This does not mean acting recklessly or making impulsive decisions. Biblical faith does not ignore reality or reject wisdom. On the contrary, it is always connected to God's direction. But when that direction becomes clear, there comes a moment when remaining still can become more dangerous than moving forward. For many people, this is exactly the hardest point. Fear tries to convince the mind that it is better to wait a little longer. Doubt suggests that it may be safer to remain where you are. The mind begins to imagine negative scenarios. What if I take this step and it doesn't work? What if nothing changes? What if I end up disappointed again? These thoughts can completely paralyze someone who is already tired of fighting. Little by little, the person may begin to believe that perhaps it is better not to try anymore. But the story of the Red Sea shows that God did not only open the path for the people of Israel, he also taught them something important about trust. Before the sea divided completely, God called the people to keep moving forward. And perhaps that is exactly the point where many people find themselves today. A moment when the circumstances have not fully changed yet, but there is a quiet invitation from God to continue moving forward. Maybe it means continuing to believe even after a disappointment. Maybe it means trying again after a failure. Maybe it means taking a small step of faith in a direction that still feels uncertain. Because many times the path God is preparing begins to become visible precisely when someone chooses to keep walking. If this reflection is helping you see your situation more clearly and strengthening your faith, take a moment to subscribe to the channel. That way you won't miss future content that brings biblical principles into real-life situations. And when we look at the rest of the story, we discover something even more surprising. The sea that seemed to be the greatest obstacle in front of the people became the very path of their crossing. And that reveals another powerful principle that we are about to understand. There is something very striking about the way God resolved the situation of the people of Israel at the Red Sea. When we think about this story, it is easy to imagine that God simply removed the problem. But when we look carefully at what actually happened, we notice something even more surprising. God could have chosen many different ways to deliver the people. He could have caused the Egyptian army to abandon the pursuit. He could have led Israel along another route before they reached the sea. He could have created some kind of distraction for the enemy army, or opened a completely different path through the desert. But God chose to act in a way that no one there could have predicted. He did not remove the obstacle before the crossing. He transformed the obstacle itself into the path. What seemed to be the end of the journey became exactly the place through which the people passed to continue their story. What looked like the limit of their journey became the doorway to a new season. Psalm 77:19 describes this reality in a profound way. Your path led through the sea, your way through the mighty waters. This verse reveals something important about how God works. Many times we expect God to resolve situations by completely eliminating the problems. We think the miracle will happen when the obstacle in front of us simply disappears. But the Bible shows that God does not always work that way. Sometimes He does not remove the obstacle immediately. Instead, He transforms the very place that seemed impossible into part of the path. In that moment, the sea represented an absolute barrier. No one there imagined that the water could open. There was no indication that a crossing would be possible. The people were looking at something that appeared completely impassable. Yet that was exactly where God chose to act. The Bible says that Moses stretched out his staff over the sea as God had commanded. Then a strong wind began to blow throughout the night and the waters started to divide. What had seemed like a solid barrier slowly turned into a corridor of dry ground. On both sides, enormous walls of water rose up, and in the middle of them appeared a path that no human being could have built, a path that had not existed before that moment. This detail reveals something important about how God works in people's lives. Many times we think God must first eliminate every difficulty before we can move forward. We expect Him to completely organize the circumstances before allowing us to continue. But often God works differently. He takes exactly what seemed to be the greatest problem and turns that place into the setting of transformation. In many people's lives, the most difficult moments also become the moments that produce the greatest growth. Times of crisis reveal inner strength that was not previously visible. Moments of loss can open the door to new beginnings. Seasons of pressure can produce spiritual maturity. This does not mean that suffering itself is good. The Bible never romanticizes pain. But it does show that God is able to use even difficult circumstances to guide someone toward a new path. The sea that once seemed impossible to cross became the symbol of Israel's liberation. Before that moment, they still carried the weight of recent slavery. They were still being pursued. They still lived under the shadow of Egypt's power. The freedom they had received still seemed fragile. But when they crossed the sea, something changed permanently. What had appeared to be the greatest blockade in their journey became the point where their story began to change. After that crossing, Egypt would no longer hold the same power over them. This is a truth that many people only discover after they pass through certain seasons of life. While they are inside the difficulty, everything feels like nothing more than a problem. Everything feels like pressure, confusion, or pain. But looking back, many people realize that that exact moment was where God began opening a new path. Sometimes the place that looks like the end is exactly where God decides to begin something new. If this reflection is making sense to you and helping you see your difficulties from a new perspective, take this moment to subscribe to the channel. Here we share biblical wisdom applied to real-life situations. But there is still another important detail in this story that many people do not notice at first. While God was opening the path through the sea, something else was happening at the same time. Because God did not only open the path for the people to cross, He also provided protection while the crossing was taking place. And that is what we are going to understand next. There is a very interesting detail in the story of the crossing of the Red Sea that often goes unnoticed when people read this biblical account. When we think about this miracle, we usually imagine only the moment when the waters divide and the people of Israel walk through the sea on dry ground. That is, without a doubt, the most dramatic part of the narrative. But the Bible shows that while the path was being opened, something else very important was happening at the same time. God did not only create the passage, He also protected the people throughout the entire process of the crossing. Because while the sea was beginning to open, the Egyptian army was still behind them. The threat had not disappeared. The danger was still real and very close. If nothing had been done, the soldiers could have reached the people before everyone had time to cross. It was an extremely delicate situation. Thousands of people were walking between walls of water, still in a moment of tension, while an experienced army was right behind them. At this point, the Bible reveals a quiet action of God that often receives far less attention than the miracle of the sea dividing. Exodus 14:19 describes what happened in that moment. Then the angel of God who was going before the host of Israel moved and went behind them, and the pillar of cloud moved from before them and stood behind them. This means that while the people were moving forward, God positioned His presence between them and the enemy army. What had previously been guiding their path now became a barrier of protection. On one side were the people crossing the sea. On the other side was the army trying to advance. Between them, the presence of God created a separation. The biblical text continues explaining that the cloud produced two different effects at the same time. For the Egyptian army, it brought darkness and confusion. For the people of Israel, it provided enough light for them to continue walking. In other words, what was a blockade for one side became direction for the other. This detail reveals something very profound about the way God works in people's lives. Many times, when we are facing a difficult crossing in life, we focus only on the path that needs to open. We wait for the solution to appear, for the opportunity to arise, for the answer to finally become visible. But while that is happening, God is often working in other areas that we cannot always perceive. He is protecting. He is limiting certain circumstances. He is preventing some situations from moving beyond a certain point. There are deliverances that are visible, like when a situation clearly changes before our eyes. But there are also invisible deliverances, things that God prevents from happening without us even realizing it. How many wrong decisions has God already protected us from? How many doors that looked promising, but could have brought serious problems, never opened? How many dangerous situations were stopped before they ever reached us? Many times we only recognize this kind of protection when we look back and begin to understand our own story more clearly. The people of Israel may not have immediately realized everything God was doing that night. They were focused on crossing the sea, walking between the walls of water, dealing with the fear and tension of that moment. But while they were walking, God was holding back the enemy. This reveals another important principle of the spiritual life. When God opens a path, He does not only point the direction, He also cares for those who are walking through it. This does not mean that there will never be challenges along the journey. The crossing of the Red Sea was still an intense and tense moment, but it does mean that God remains present in the process. Perhaps you are living through a similar moment right now, a season where something new is beginning to unfold, yet there are still pressures, concerns, or threats around you. The story of the Red Sea reminds us that even in moments like these, God is still working. He opens the path ahead, but He also protects what is happening while the crossing is taking place. If this reflection is strengthening your faith and bringing clarity to your journey, take a moment to subscribe to the channel. Here we explore biblical principles that help us understand life's challenges and the way God works through circumstances. And when the people finally finished crossing the sea, something very significant happened. That crossing was not just an escape from a temporary danger. It marked the beginning of a new chapter in their story. And that is exactly what we are going to talk about next. There are moments in life that function as true turning points. Situations that, once they happen, completely change the direction of the story. Before that moment, everything seemed to be moving in one direction. After it, a new stage begins. That is exactly what happened when the people of Israel finished crossing the Red Sea. Throughout that entire night, they walked between walls of water, crossing a path that had not existed just hours earlier. Every step carried tension, amazement, and perhaps even disbelief at what they were experiencing. But finally, the moment came when the last group crossed the sea. Exodus 14:21-22 describes that moment clearly. And the waters were divided, and the people of Israel went into the midst of the sea on dry ground, the waters being a wall to them on their right hand and on their left. What had begun as a desperate situation was now becoming a defining moment in their history. Up to that point, the people still carried the weight of recent slavery. They had left Egypt, but Egypt still seemed to be behind them, trying to pull them back. But after the crossing, something changed permanently. The sea that had opened for them to pass through also closed over the Egyptian army. The threat that once seemed impossible to escape was gone. The power that had dominated their lives for years could no longer reach them in the same way. That moment marked the definitive end of one phase of their history. This shows us something very important about the way God works in people's lives. There are moments when God does not simply resolve a specific problem. He uses that situation to begin an entirely new stage. Some experiences function as true dividing lines in life. Before them, a person was trapped in an old cycle. After them, something changes deeply. Sometimes that change comes through an important decision. Sometimes it comes after a difficult season that produces growth and maturity. And in other moments, it comes when God intervenes in a way that completely redirects the course of the story. In the case of the people of Israel, That crossing was not just a momentary rescue. It marked the beginning of a different journey. They were no longer a people running from Egypt. Now they were a people moving toward the purpose God had prepared for them. This also happens in the spiritual lives of many people. There are seasons when an entire phase of life seems blocked, filled with limitations, fear, and uncertainty. A person looks ahead and cannot imagine how the situation could ever change. But when God opens a path, it is often not only the circumstance that changes, the perspective changes as well. The way a person sees their own story begins to shift. What once looked like an ending begins to reveal itself as a transition. Many people only realize this when they look back. In the middle of the struggle, everything felt like confusion. But after they pass through that season, they can see that it was the moment when a new chapter began. Perhaps you are exactly at that point right now. A moment when it feels like something is ending, but it is still not completely clear what comes next. The story of the Red Sea reminds us that when God opens a path, He is not only solving an immediate problem. Many times He is preparing the beginning of a new season. If this kind of biblical reflection is helping you see your own journey more clearly, take a moment to subscribe to the channel. That way you can continue receiving content that connects the wisdom of Scripture with practical life challenges. Because the crossing of the Red Sea leaves us with a powerful message. Even when it seems like there is no way out, God can still open paths that no one imagined. And that is exactly the truth we will reinforce in the conclusion of this video. When we look again at the entire story of the crossing of the Red Sea, we realize that it began with a feeling that many people know very well. The people of Israel were facing a situation that seemed completely blocked. In front of them was the sea. Behind them was a powerful army. Around them there was only desert. Humanly speaking, there was no way out. That scene represents exactly what many people experience at certain moments in life. Situations where it feels like all the options have disappeared. Moments when doors seem to close all at once. Seasons when the mind tries to find a solution, but every possibility seems to lead back to the same point, an impossible obstacle. Maybe you are living through something like this right now. It may be financial pressure that does not seem to ease. It may be an important decision about the future that feels impossible to make. It may be a difficult relationship, a project that is not moving forward, or a season of life where everything feels stuck. When we are inside the situation, it is very easy to believe that we have reached the end of the road. But the Bible shows that many times it is exactly at that point that God begins to act in ways we still cannot perceive. The people of Israel did not know, in that moment, that the sea would open. They could not imagine that that enormous barrier would become the very place of their crossing. To them, everything seemed blocked, but God was already working in that situation. This story reveals a powerful spiritual principle. Many times the miracle does not happen before the challenge disappears. It happens right in the middle of what once seemed impossible. The obstacle that looked final becomes the place where God reveals His power. Psalm 37:23 brings a promise that connects deeply with this idea. The Lord directs the steps of the godly. This means that God does not simply observe people's journeys from a distance. He participates in the journey. He guides steps. He opens paths. He directs the story even when the way forward is not yet fully visible to us. Often we want to see the entire path before taking the next step. We want to be certain that everything will work out before we continue walking. But the Bible shows that God's path is often revealed gradually, one step at a time, one decision at a time, one crossing at a time. Perhaps today you are looking at some area of your life and thinking there is no way forward. It may be a financial struggle, an important decision about the future, a complicated relationship, or a season of uncertainty that seems endless. When we are inside the situation, everything appears bigger than it really is. The obstacle feels permanent. The solution feels distant. But the story of the Red Sea reminds us of something essential. What looks like a complete blockade may actually be the place where God is preparing your crossing. Sometimes the path begins with a step of faith. Sometimes it begins with perseverance when it would be easier to give up. And other times it begins simply with the decision to keep trusting God, even when the circumstances have not changed yet. Because many times God is working in areas we still cannot see. He may be preparing opportunities. He may be aligning circumstances. He may be strengthening you internally for what lies ahead. And when the right moment comes, what once seemed impossible begins to turn into a path. If today you feel like you are standing before an impossible sea, this may be the moment to remember that God is still the same God who opens paths where no one imagined they could exist. And perhaps what looks like the end today is only the beginning of a new season you cannot yet see. Now I want to invite you to do something simple for a moment. Think about what sea stands before your life today. What situation feels impossible to cross? What challenge feels too great for you to face alone? And in silence, present that situation to God. Ask Him for wisdom to recognize the paths He may be opening, even if you cannot yet see them clearly. Also ask for courage to keep moving forward, even when the next step feels uncertain, because the Bible shows that when God decides to act, even what once seemed impossible can become the path that leads into a new season. If this message made sense to you and brought hope to your heart, take a moment to subscribe to the channel. That way you can continue receiving content that helps you understand the scriptures and apply them to real-life situations. And if you know someone who is going through a difficult moment, consider sharing this video with them. Sometimes a word of hope arrives at exactly the moment someone needs it most. Thank you for watching until the end. May God strengthen your faith, guide your steps, and lead you along the paths He is preparing for your life.